Welcome to the lecture on your money or your life, which is the take-home assignment that is worth 25% of your test for Chapter 5. We're going to cover a lot of different topics here that are probably the most relevant to you now and in the future about how you manage your money and hopefully live a better life. Are you financially savvy? The entire lecture or the handout starts with asking yourself about financial savviness or the knowledge that you have about finances. And there's some ideas here about what it means to be financially savvy, and less than half of Americans consider themselves financially smart, which when you think about it is kind of crazy, right? Like if we can keep more of our own money, we're always focused on money, how much we make, how much we keep, what we can buy, etc. So you would think that knowing about finances would be really smart. And I say that from someone who probably ignored it for a good part of his early professional career and didn't really focus on this until later on. And I could have saved a lot of money. What I typically say in these things, if I had not only learned what's in this lecture, but applied it earlier in my career, I believe I would be at least $250,000. Yes, $250,000 richer right now. And I'm not talking about anything major. I'm talking about how I used credit cards, the cars that I bought, and the home loans that I had. If I had known a little bit more, I'd be much better prepared for my life now and be richer right now. 45% of people know that they should set aside 20% of their income for savings prior to spending their money. More than half of Americans know an emergency fund should hold 6 months of living expenses in case something happens. Only 1 in 4 Americans are actually debt-free, and this means that they have no credit card debt, no loan debt. The only debt that they have is possibly a mortgage, which is not necessarily considered in this debt-free, because a mortgage is not only a debt, but it's also an investment because of the historical value of investing in your own home. And then 46% agree that retirement savings should begin in a person's 20s so that you take advantage again of what we call the time value of money. But while a lot of people know these things, they aren't applying them. And this is certainly me. I knew I should have been saving more money for my retirement. I knew I should have been not using credit cards as much as possible, but I wasn't doing all of these things. 70% of Americans currently have some form of debt. That's credit card or loans, a car loan, etc. 30% of those in debt have no plan to pay it off. And this is, to me, is the really scary thing that, especially if you're talking about credit cards, if you see no way to get out of it, that's a dangerous spot to be in. And again, I speak to you not as some wise financial sage. I speak to you from a person who kept credit card debt for years. And when you're paying, 20+% of that every year, you are giving a lot of money away to the bank and effectively raising the cost of everything you bought. And we're going to look at that. 2/3 of people do not have 6 months of living expenses saved in an emergency fund. 30% of Americans don't have any fund at all. And more than half of respondents don't contribute to a 401k, an IRA, an individual retirement account, or any other retirement plan. So they have really no plan. They're not working towards securing their financial stability when they're no longer able to work or when they don't want to work because they're retired. So what's the good news? Well, if you talk to people, most people want to be financially independent. And all that means is that they're simply living debt-free, that they don't have credit card debt, all their loans are paid off, or they have a plan for it, and really that you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. And for me, there were times that, while I was living paycheck to paycheck, I wasn't in tremendous problems. I really wasn't able to get out of that mode. And if I hit any snags, that was really troublesome. Okay. So here's some quotes from Warren Buffett, the sage of Nebraska or something. really wise guy, one of the richest men in the world, um, who lives in the same house that he bought when he was young, doesn't drive a fancy car because he really understands the time value of money. So here's what he says. On your earning, never depend on single income. Make investments to create a second source. So you should be putting some money aside no matter what it is all the time into an investment account so that eventually those investments will take care of you. A lot of people have a second income to do this. I was speaking to a young man the other day, and he works for an insurance company, and he bought a pressure sprayer, and so he works on weekends and evenings sometimes to make extra money, and he says he can pull anywhere from 500 to a couple $1,000s extra every month in income that he uses for his investment into his future. On spending, I love this quote. If you buy things you do not need, soon you will have to sell things you do need. And I think that's a great, great quote. And Lord knows I could still use that. And if you're an Amazon addict, as I sort of still am, I'm trying to curb that. On savings, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. Again, another quote. I did this early in my career. My first job had a credit union, and so I automatically took out 10 or 20% of every paycheck, moved it into a savings account. But the problem is that about after 6 months, I'd see how much was in there and I'd decide to spend it. This is not a real savings account. It's kind of a temporary holding account that I eventually spent and didn't use for future needs. On taking risk, never test the depth of the river with both feet. What is this saying? There's a lot of talk about Bitcoin, etc. So while you may want to dabble in that, you don't want to put all of your retirement income, etc., into something that's high risk. You may want to put the most of your initial investments into something that's low or medium risk, and then later on, as you build your nest egg, take a few more risks, but again, not with all of your money. Which goes with the next one on investment. Do not put all your eggs in one basket. A diversified investment plan is the best so that if one company goes down, you still have investments in others. On expectations. Honesty is a very expensive gift. Do not expect it from cheap people. What is he trying to say here? Be careful who you listen to for advice. Think about who you trust. And if you don't know someone, let's say, for example, a financial advisor, talk to people you do trust and see who they're using, or etc. My parents actually had a great financial advisor. They had him for years, and it took me a long time before I eventually talked to this guy. It would have been so smart if I had talked to him really 10 or 20 years beforehand, again, contributing to that $250,000 that I could have now that I no longer have. Okay, so at the bottom, part one is really for you to learn about TVM, the time value of money. And there's a great website here called tvmcalcs.com that will explain this. It has a great tutorial that talks about the time value of money, and it also talks about how you solve these problems. In the chapter 5, I've been teaching you how to use the time value of money app on your TI-84 calculator. In this website, there's also two things. Number 2 here is how to think about time value money problems, because while students use the app, they get overconfident that this test is going to be easy because they just have to plug in numbers and the app will calculate the answer. But you have to understand the problems so you know how to input the problems. Finally, it also has a tutorial on how to use your TI-84, okay? So I highly suggest that you plan on spending probably a couple hours at this site. It will really help you with this next test. But beyond that, hopefully it helps you understand the time value of money and change some of your habits or improve some of your habits so that you keep more of your money and that you're making better financial choices. This is not something you have to wait until you have a job or a better job or you finish college. Making good financial choices is something we should all be doing all the time. And it's hard because everything around us is telling us to spend money. Who do we admire in our culture? It's celebrities and rich people. We want to take those vacations that we see all the time on TV. We think, we work hard, so we deserve those kind of rewards. And yet, a lot of times, that kind of emotional thinking it's made me make bad choices. So, I really highly recommend you plan on spending an hour or two as soon as possible. This will help you with all your homework. It will help you understand Chapter 5. And it's my bet that it will also help you figure out how to do time value of money problems, and probably make you want to keep this damn calculator even after the class, which is one of the funny things, is that in college, students sell their calculators as quick as possible as soon as they finish their last math class. And hopefully through this app, you realize that's a really powerful app. If you're buying a car, etc., and you want to think about how much to spend, you can do your own calculations based on what you want to pay a month, and then figure out the kind of cars you want to get by how much you'll have to spend. Do not allow bankers and salespeople to do this for you, because they are going to pick the solution that's in their best interest, which means you're paying them more money. Okay? After this first part, we kind of look at, what is the goal of banks and businesses that provide consumer credit? And you can read through this. But the big thing here is just that, they're there to make money. How do the banks and people that give you credit make money? By the interest you pay. So like any business, they're trying to maximize their income. So they're trying to maximize the interest that you pay as a consumer. So they're going to entice you with advertisement. They're going to get you to focus on a monthly payment instead of the total cost of whatever you're buying, etc. Okay, so you need to be smart, at least about your borrowing practices, whether it's credit cards or loans, etc. So be careful. Be careful that you're not focused on payments. And every salesman, every bank, every time you try to get a loan, that's what they talk about. Oh, your monthly payment will only be this. Oh yeah, it's going to take you 12 years to pay it off, because they don't want you to see the total amount that you're paying. Emotional manipulation. Be careful here. This is what advertisers do best and greatest. And some of these things are very emotional in our culture. Buying a car is a hugely emotional purchase. We almost look at them like outfits, like, oh, look what he's driving, look what she's driving. That it's some kind of reflection on who that person is. So when you realize that you're really emotionally attached to something, figuring out a strategy that lets you kind of step back from that emotionality of the choice, and make a good financial choice as well. So some ways to do that are to focus on the interest rate. How much are you being charged? Make sure you're getting the best deal, and also the loan term. Now, there's a couple different kinds of banks. There's a normal bank like Chase Bank, and then there's something called a credit union. In the past, credit unions were connected to either professions or to a specific company. Credit unions are better banks, especially if you're borrowing money, because they're kind of like nonprofits in that they are there to benefit their members. So while a normal credit card at Chase Bank may have an interest rate of 23%, the credit card at your credit union may only be 13%. That's 10% difference a year. And especially if you're carrying some credit card debt, that can be really important. And there are lots of credit unions now, and most of them now you can join for free, whether, like, for example, there's the Texas Teachers Credit Union. You no longer have to be a teacher to be in that, etc. So, a credit union, which has all of the same features, online ability, etc., as a regular bank, has better rates for you. So if you already have a bank, you might want to consider moving your money and all of your things over to a credit union, which can do everything. It can take your direct deposit, it can give you a credit card, give you a home loan, a car loan, a home improvement loan, etc., and you'll be getting better terms. Okay? The thing about all of this that we're talking about, and why I do this assignment, is you need to do you. You know where your weak spots are, you know where your strengths are, And so you need to be thinking about how can you make better choices for you? You know, maybe that shirt, you need that shirt because it's, a reward for something you did. Or maybe right now you need to not buy that shirt because you're always buying shirts and you have 10 at home that you haven't worn. It's only you can decide these things. Hey, it's your money. You earned it. You get to spend it how you want. What I'm trying to do here is educate you more about how the more money you save and invest over time creates more freedom and more options for you than doing what you see on TV about buy it now. Life takes Visa. You deserve it. Okay? So the first question that you need to fill an answer for on your take-home assignment is, what is one good strategy for you to use to not get swept away by emotion on a big purchase? Just write your answer in there. This is all about you, so there aren't really necessarily right or wrong answers. Some of the calculations are going to be right and wrong, and you want to take your time with them, but they are very hopefully well described how to do them, telling you really what to put in the app, etc. So this whole exercise is about you learning about money, and then you learning about yourself and thinking about it, reflecting and saying, what could I do differently? And that's the first question. So you want to buy something, but you think maybe you should wait or whatever. What's a good strategy for you to step back from your emotions, especially on a big purchase? Part two, retirement is all about time. This is the second section of the take-home assignment, and it's really focusing on retirement. The first thing I want to talk about, and it's not in your document, are IRAs. An IRA is an individual retirement account. And about 20 or so years ago, every company had pensions, which meant automatically they put money into a retirement account for you. And sometimes they, required you to match it, etc. Well, now they give you the option. And so almost every company now has IRAs, individual retirement accounts, 401ks, etc. And when you get hired, they give you a chance to decide how much money you're going to put into it, a percentage. I think they top out at between 3 and 5%. And then the company will match it. So this means, like, if you say, okay, I'm going to put 5%, they're going to take 5% out of your paycheck and put it into that retirement account. So your paycheck will be 5% less. But technically, because they're matching it, you get a 5% raise because the company is also putting that same 5% into your retirement account. And once they put it in, that's your money forever. So whenever you have an option, when you start a company or when the annual cycle for picking your benefits comes around again, always maximize the percentage that you put into your retirement account, into your IRA, because what you're getting is double that money. Everything you put in, they match. So you're automatically getting a double investment. If you're putting in 500, they're putting in 500. So now you've got 1,000 going in each month. Okay, so IRAs, maximize the percentage. It will benefit you later. Okay, retirement for most of us seems so far away that we think I'll handle that later. This was definitely me. I, however, benefited from the point that when I first started my professional career after college, every company offered a pension. So it wasn't an option. For me, if it was an option, I probably would have chosen to keep the money, thinking, oh, I'm young, it's going to be years before I retire, I'll do that later. Well, that doesn't work out so well, as we'll see in these calculations right now. So what I want you to do, what we're going to do is think about what is the impact of money if we wait to start putting it away for retirement. And so that's this assignment. The first question is just, how old are you now? Okay, so based upon how old you are now, how many years until you're 60? So just take 60 minus your age and you'll get a number. Now we're going to do a little comparison. Let's say you put $100 monthly into a retirement account that averages 6.5% interest compounded monthly. Okay, so here's your first question. How much money will you have in your retirement account at age 60 if you start now? And notice here you have all of the things you do. So the answer to number 2, how many years until you're 60? is in the field with N, that times 12, because you're putting away that money every month. The interest rate is 6.5 divided by 12, because it's the interest percent and it's compounded monthly, so we divide by 12. The present value in your account is 0 because you don't have any money in your retirement account yet. The payment that you're putting in each month is 100, and we're trying to figure out the future value. So that's our first calculation. Then we're just going to do the same calculation, but imagine waiting 10 years. So whatever number you answered here in number 2, how many years till 60, just subtract 10 from that and put that in here, right? And then times 12. All the other fields are the same, and then calculate your future value. The last question says, what if you just waited until you were 40? So everyone's answer to 6, number 6 here, will be the same. Because if you're 40, it's going to be 20 years until you retire at 60 times 12. And again, the rest of these fields are the same. And what this will give you a chance to do is see the difference in the amount of money that if you put $100 away now versus waiting 10 years and putting 100 away versus waiting till you were 40 to start and only having 20 years. Okay? So I want you to look at this example that it will show you the huge impact that's happening. So I did an example for a 22-year-old student. A 22-year-old student at the age of 60, if they put money away right now, they would have almost $200,000, putting $100 away. If they wait just 10 years, even though they're very young, look at that. They get less than half of that money. And if they wait till they're 40, they get a quarter of that money. Imagine the difference that this would make in your retirement account. And that's just $100 a month. Once you're working regularly, you're certainly going to put more than that in there. $100 a month isn't even probably 5%. It's not even, maybe, who knows what percentage that is. But it's really low. So I want you to see this difference. And this is why we talk about the time value of money and why it's so important to start investing as soon as possible. And especially they say retirement savings is best started in your 20s. Again, I was lucky because my pension started, I was 22, I believe, when I started work. And so I immediately had money put into a pension account at that age. So what is recommended? So some people don't really know, well, how much should I have for retirement? How much should I put away? So what's generally recommended is that you should be saving 15% of your income for retirement. That seems like a lot, right? But remember, we're back here at this IRA. If you put in 5%, your employer puts in 5%, you're already at 10%. So then if you saved another 10% and put another 5% in an investment account on your own, then you could put another 5% into savings that you could have for a rainy day fund or for whatever use that you want. Okay? So don't forget you can include your IRA in this, and that takes off the bigger chunk of it, especially if you're putting in 5% already. A retirement goal is that you should have 10 times your annual salary by the age of 68. So if you're making $100,000, which by the time you're getting close to there you are, that means you should have $1 million in your retirement account in order to live comfortably or similarly to the life that you live now. And I guarantee that all of you guys, if you get a college degree and are working, you'll be making $100,000 for sure by the time you get up there. Okay? So this can help you have some of the goals, etc. So go through those calculations and see what it means for you. Okay? An interesting thing that's happened over the last 10 or 20 years is this, what's called the FIRE movement. I highly recommend you Google the term FIRE. And this is for people who want to retire early. I'm not talking about at 55. I'm talking about people that want to retire at 40. Some of them retire at 35. There was a great Netflix documentary on this young couple that was living the high life, living in San Diego, yuppied out the butt, driving Lexuses, etc., happy hour and eating out all the time. And then they heard about this FIRE movement and they decided they'd rather retire early and live, however they wanted, versus, waiting till they were 60 to really enjoy life. And it's not easy. It's about, Instead of putting 15% of your income toward retirement, it's maybe like putting 40% or 50%. The higher that percentage is that you can put towards your retirement, the quicker you'll be eligible to retire because you will hit these goals sooner. Okay, so this fire movement is all about retiring really early, and it's about, really looking at, what's important to you. If this is something of interest, I would check out that Netflix special. I can't remember what it was called, but it's a documentary about a young couple with a child who wanted to do the fire thing, and you watch them over a period of, I think, 2 years, and they struggle. It's not easy to go from a Lexus to an old Toyota minivan. And so it was just interesting to see their emotional struggles too, and how they fought through it. Part three is all about cars. In American culture, cars are important. We view cars almost as if they are an outfit. Hey, look what he's driving, look what she's driving. Oh, I can't drive that jalopy. And for me, a lot of times the story inside my head was, I work hard for my money. I deserve a nice car. And, it's kind of embarrassing, but this is one of the ways that I lost a lot of money. Okay? Cars are the second largest expense for most families after housing. Yet many still think of cars like an outfit or accessory. A 1 to 2 year old used car can immediately save you 15 to 20% on average. Now, that is something I did take advantage of. I only had 2 new cars. I bought 1 new car and I leased 1 new car in my whole car history. And the rest of them I bought used, a couple years old, relatively lower mileage, probably under 50,000 or around there. And then later on, I tried to find cars that, were more reliable and would last longer. But that took me a long time. I'll tell you about that in a minute. About 25% of Americans lease a car instead of buying. And I thought this was much higher, but it's been growing. And why this happens is because people can get a nicer car because they get a lower monthly cost from the car dealership. Well, yeah, you do that, but you got to remember what you're doing is renting that car. So after 3 or 4 years, whatever your lease period is, you're returning the car and you own nothing. So you really have to think about, again, if whenever you're thinking about money, you want to think long term, not just short term. Everyone, the banks, the car salesman, anyone giving you a loan is getting you to think short term. How do I know that? Because they're always saying, what can you spend a month? That's a short term thinking. So they'll say, hey, yeah, you can afford this car, but not in a 4 year loan, but in a 7 year loan. Well, that means you're paying more interest. They're making more money. You're happy because your payment hasn't changed or it's lower, but you really shouldn't be happy because the ultimate price for that car is quite high, and it's locking you in because it's going to take you longer to get what they call upright. You're going to owe money on that car longer if you have a longer period. And that's what happened to me. Probably the first, I don't know, 7 cars I owned, every time I try to trade in or trade up, I actually owed more money than the car was worth because I took out longer loan periods so that I would have a lower monthly payment, but it cost me more in the long run. That's what you have to remember. Don't be thinking just payments. Of course you have to think about payments. You got to think about your monthly budget, but that's not the only thing, and it shouldn't be the first priority. 64% of Americans have a car 5 years or younger. This to me tells me that we have a car culture, that we don't think of cars as a functional tool to transport us. We think of it like an outfit. We want the latest bauble. We want the latest iPhone. We want, all the features. We want it to look slick because part of our identity is connected to a car. But even now, like car reliability is much higher. Most cars will, go well beyond 100,000 miles now. And that's a lifespan of at least about 10 years. So getting rid of your car at 5 or less, that's not exactly maybe the best thing financially for you. So here's my embarrassing story. I've purchased 12 automobiles since I was 16. And at my age, that was averaging basically a new car every 3.5 years. As I've mentioned, for the first probably at least 10, if not longer years, I was upside down. Every time I trade a car in because I wanted a better car, I end up having not only to pay for the loan for the new car, they had to add a couple thousand in because I owed money on the old car. So, I just became in this cycle, almost like we do with credit cards. Remember that all the calculations in this part, and what you're going to do on this section, is just kind of compare um, what it would cost over 12 years to lease a car, or really lease 4 cars, because most leases are 3 years. So you can see what happens over a longer period of time instead of just in a monthly payment. Okay. But these calculations do not include your insurance. So one of the things to also keep in mind, the longer you keep a car, the cheaper your insurance. Okay. So again, in this exercise, we're going to look at the impact of car ownership over 12 years. This would mean getting 4 different 3-year leases. But again, at the end, you don't own anything. You turn them in and have to buy a new car or lease another one. Or we're going to look at buying and owning 2 cars over that 12 years so that even at the end, you own 2 vehicles. All right. I currently own 2 cars. I've not had a car payment for 6 years. And let me tell you, that was a sweet moment. And I cannot believe it took me so long to get there that I kept trading in my cars before they were paid off. But not having a car payment, for me, I think the last car payment I had was $350. That's a nice extra chunk of change to have every month. $300 times 12, that's almost 4,000, well, 350, that's well over $4,000 a year that I can spend on something else. In addition, because my cars are older, I own a 2006 and a 2007 Toyota that I plan to drive until they're hopefully get to 200,000 miles, and I've got a ways to go before that. I now only pay $35 a month in insurance. Before, I was paying at least 5, 6, 7 times that when my cars were newer. So the longer you hold onto a car, the less your insurance is. And part of that is because you no longer keep comprehensive. Comprehensive insurance is what replaces your car if you have an accident and you're responsible. And what they say is that if the amount of money that you pay a year, for your car insurance is 10% of what the value of your car is. So if I'm paying $500 a year for my car insurance with comprehension, and the value of my car is only $5,000, they say that's a good time to drop the comprehensive policy. Okay? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at your home. This is the biggest expense for most Americans. And it's also been the best investment for most families. What does this mean? Even though you're paying money, residential properties have an average annual return of investment of 10.6%. The stock market in general, there are periods where it's really crazy, wild, and good. But overall, the entire history of the stock market, its return of investment is between 7 and 8%. So a home has always been historically a good value. Of course, there's times when the market crashes, etc. But look at it. It crashed in 2008. We're now, 12, 14 years later, and those values are way above where they were when they crashed. So if you'd held on to your home, you're back in good standing. Homes are one of the most emotionally charged investments we're going to make. Of course they are. It's where we're going to live. It's the neighborhood we're going to live in. It's the things that are in our neighborhood. It's the schools that our kids are going to go to. The banks will continue to get you to focus on monthly costs so that they can get you in a more expensive home. But you need to be smarter and not only think about the monthly costs, you need to think about the total costs. And a great question to also ask yourself is, how old will I be when I finally pay this mortgage off? Okay? Because that gives you another frame of reference that we're not necessarily thinking about. I got really lucky and I had a large dog, and the circumstances worked out such that I couldn't find an apartment, and I found this realtor who, at the age of 22, taught me that I could actually buy a home. She actually helped me a little bit. That's a longer story. But I always jokingly say my dog bought my first house. I bought a small condominium in Florida, which is where I was working. The cost of the condominium, it was a one bedroom on the edge of Florida State University, was $29,000. There's government programs for your first home that you buy. This program allowed me to put 3% down, which was only $900. And then the closing costs, the administrative costs at that point were fixed at $600. So I only needed $1,500 to buy my first home. And when the realtor first suggested I buy a home, my response to her was, "Lady, I'm a kid. I've only been working for 3 months since college. How am I going to buy a house?" And she showed me that I could. Okay. So even then, I didn't think about these things. I just let people guide me through. And you need to be smart. You need to understand how these things work to get, just to hold on to more of your money. A lot of the things that I could have done weren't even difficult, and they weren't big sacrifices. They would have just been me making smarter choices. In this case, for that first condo, I took a 30-year mortgage. Well, that was crazy. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as 15 and 20-year mortgages. That would have changed my payments by maybe $40, $50 a month, if that, and I would have paid it off in half the time. And then think about that next 15 years, all of those money I've been paying to the bank, I could have had for myself every month. Okay? So in America, 90% of homes are still bought with a 30-year mortgage. Yet 15 and 20-year mortgages save lots of money, and they don't change substantially the value of the house that you're qualified, not by much. Okay? That's what this exercise is going to do. You're going to look at the impact of choosing a 15, 20, or 30-year mortgage. This is a great exercise to do again when you're actually considering buying a home. When you think you're ready to buy a home, look at what you can qualify for and do it based upon a 15-year mortgage, a 20-year mortgage, and a 30-year mortgage. And answer all the questions that we're going to look at, because that will allow you to kind of step back from the emotionality of the purchase and try to make a good decision for yourself. Now, the mortgage interest rates we're using in this calculation are from 2016, and they are much lower than they are today in 2022. I'm leaving them in there because I do believe in another year or two, once we get past COVID, once we get past some of this inflation stuff, that they will fall back to a more reasonable rate. Okay, so currently the mortgage rates are more than double. If you wanted to see, you could certainly just go online and Google, what are the mortgage rates for 15, 20, and 30-year mortgages, and get a sample there and do the same calculation based upon today. So let's look at an example. We'll use the same 22-year-old college student. This is going right through the questions. Just answer each question as you go to it. The first one is asking you when you expect to graduate. This student expects to graduate with their bachelor's degree in 3 years. And so we made an assumption that 2 years after you graduate, 2 years after working, you'll be ready to buy your first home. So she's going to graduate in 3 years, add 2 more years to that. So in 5 years from now, she will be 27. And so that's when she's going to buy her home. Then we got to figure out, we got to make an estimate of how much money you're going to make. If you can look up on salaries.com if you know the job that you want to do and see what the starting income is there and use that. If you don't know that, you can use $50,000 because that's a good average income for college graduates. Okay. Now, your monthly payment will be the same across all three terms. Okay, because this is just based on 30% of your income, and 30% of $50,000 is $15,000, and if you divide 12 in that, what your monthly payment will be, it'll be $1,250. So you can see the second line is going to be the same no matter what you use. And if you're using $50,000, yours will be the same answer as it is here. So the first question is, how old will you be when it's paid off? Well, this is when we're buying the house. If it's 15 years, we're just going to add 15. So we'll be 42. The student will be 42 if she does a 15-year loan. 20 plus 27 is 47. She'll be 47 if she does a 20-year loan, and she'll be 57 if she does a 30-year loan. it just helps you kind of think about this. Do I really want to be still paying for my house in my 50s when I'm getting near retirement? Or would I like to be finished paying for my house when I'm in my 40s and have a lot more money that I can put into my investments or into vacations or into my children's college or whatever? So these are questions. There's not a right answer for which loan to take. Again, this is you do you, but do you with more information. Okay, the purchase price, now you're going to use your TVM app. You've got the terms, which is 15 times 12. You know the interest rate, it's on the sheet, it's different for each of them. Put that in there, divided by 12. The payment is your present value is what you're going to calculate. Okay, and that, so you leave that for blank or zero to begin with. Your payment is $12.50 a month. Your future value is zero because that's when your home is paid off, and so then you can find the purchase price of your home, which would be the present value. Okay, so based upon these numbers, this student, it could buy a house that's worth $182.592. Okay, just based on that payment and the payment plan, etc. Okay, so if we think about the total cost, this is 1,250 times 15 years times 12 months, and that's the total month we pay for the house, which was 225,000. Subtract those two amounts and you see the amount of interest. So in order to buy this house, to borrow money from the bank, you paid the bank $42,000 of the 182,000. So a little bit less than 25%. Doing those same calculations with a different term, now we have the N equals 20 years times 12. The interest rate is a different interest rate divided by 12. The payment is the same. The future value is still zero, and our now present value, the house that we could buy today, the money we could borrow today, is $218,969,000. So while we're adding 5 years to this, we've added what, about almost $40,000 to the value of the house we could buy. But notice what happens with the interest. When we pay another $12.50 a month for another 5 years, our total cost of the house is now up to $300,000. And so the interest we paid is virtually double. Even though we've only added 5 years to our loan, by taking a 20-year loan, we've now doubled the interest we're going to pay for that house. So the cost of the house is getting more expensive because we're paying it over a longer period of time. Finally, if we do that last calculation with 30 years, 30 times 12 for N, it's all documented on that sheet. Notice what happens now. Here, our interest was getting close to half of our home value. And here, our interest is well over half. Our home value that we can afford now is $280,000. Yes, it's $100,000 more than if we did 15 years, but look at the cost. While the house is worth only $100,000 more, we paid more than double. Instead of paying $220,000, we paid double. What am I saying? We did pay double, $450,000 for that house, and over $169,000, which is again well over half of the value of our house when we started. So these things make a difference. And all the bank is going to show you is this last column. Hey, look, for $12.50, look what you can get. Hey, don't worry about those last numbers. Your house will be worth more in the future. Well, yeah, but do you want to be paying on a house until you're 57? These are the questions you want to ask, again, so you can do you. Make a better choice. Don't make the bank's choice unless that's the right choice for you. Okay, moving on to credit cards. By the way, buying my first house with that dog at 22 was the best thing that happened to me, because not so much because I bought a house. It was more that I learned that I could buy a house. And 3 years later, when I moved to Dallas, I lived in an apartment for only 6 months while I was getting used to the city. And then I bought my first condo here. And at one time, I owned over 4 different properties. I've done very good at buying homes. I have a condo in downtown Dallas, or in uptown Dallas, and I also have a lake house. And all of them I bought really inexpensively Unfortunately, I still would have saved a shitload of money. Sorry. I would have saved a lot of money had I not taken out 30-year mortgages. I didn't need to do them, and it was a foolish move. And honestly, it was an ignorant move because I did not realize that there were shorter mortgages because the banks didn't explain that to me. And that was my mistake. All right, now let's look at credit cards. The worst thing about credit cards, it feels free and it ain't. Most credit cards charge more than 20% interest annually. Think about that, 20%. Compare this to the 0.01%. That is a percent, so it's 0.0001 if you write it as a decimal. Currently, most savings accounts from banks are giving you 0.01% interest. But so on the money that you put in there that they're using, they give you 0.01%. For their money that you're using in a credit card, they charge you 20%. This is why you should not be trusting banks with your financial future. You need to figure it out and make good choices. Most advertisements around credit cards focuses on rewards from your card when you buy stuff. But recognize this. You only get this reward for free if you pay off your credit card balance every single month. Otherwise, all you're doing is you're paying 20% for a reward of 1 or 2%. It is not worth it. It is not valuable. And yet, look at what they're talking about. They're not talking about the cost of using a credit card. They're talking about the benefit of using a credit card. And you know who that benefits? The smallest percent of card owners, because the vast majority of people do not pay off their credit card every month. It took me 20, 30 years to get there after college. And I'll tell you what, I did go to Germany over Christmas this year for $200 and I flew business class. And that was because I use a credit card to pay all my bills, my phone, etc. But I pay it off every month. I have it set up automatically to deduct that from my bank account. And so in that case, the credit card works in my favor because these are bills I'd have to pay anyway. My phone bill, my insurance bill, any bill that I can pay with a credit card, I pay it with a credit card. And then once a month, that credit card takes my money out of my checking account and I get the benefit from that. And so, yeah, it is a nice reward. It's not a lot, but, a free business class ticket every 2 or 3 years, hey, I'm good with that. If you are paying just the minimum due each month, recognize this. It will take you more than 15 years to pay off that credit card. And that's assuming that you don't charge anything else. If you keep charging, you are on the treadmill and you are never getting off. If you just pay the minimum balance, then everything you buy with that credit card is really costing you 2.5 times as much. So that $4 coffee that you bought at Starbucks with your credit card is now what, it's now a $10 coffee. Do you want to buy a $10 coffee? Is that good for you? Maybe it is. Maybe it's okay. You just need to think about this. In your packet, you'll see that there's an actual credit card bill, and this is required by law now that the banks show you how long it would take for you to pay off your balance if you paid the minimum balance, and how much it would cost you completely. How much if you paid an extra certain amount, how long that would take, or how much it would cost, how much you would have to pay each month to pay it off in, I think, 3 or 4 years. Okay, so pay attention to this. Honestly, I cannot tell you, it was at least a decade, probably 2, that I was minimum payment Michael. And what an idiot that is. Again, this is where, between cars, mortgages for 30 years, and credit cards, I feel confident I would easily be $240,000 richer. And honestly, if I'd invested that money, shit, I might be retired now. So what's recommended? Use credit card for bigger purchases that you plan to keep greater than 8 years. Maybe you're starting out with your new job in a new town. You don't have furniture for your apartment. You really don't have money to buy a sofa. That might be a good idea to buy that sofa with your credit card so you have something to sit on or a bed to sleep on. and then pay it off quickly. Do not pay minimum balances. Pay it off quickly. Use your credit card for emergencies that you don't have cash for. Your car breaks down and you need to get it fixed. That's a good use of your credit card. You can think of your credit card as part of your emergency fund if you're not spending it all the time on coffee and dinners. That's what, I spent my credit cards on the stupidest things, not the stupidest things, but the smallest of things, dinners, meals, drinks out, etc. And, this was a very bad use of it because because I was only paying the minimum balance, I ended up paying 2.5 times for everything I bought. Crazy. Stop the endless cycle of always having credit card debt. Pay your balance in full monthly. I know it's tough. You may not even be able to see how you can get there, but there are ways to get there. I've heard of people who actually put their credit card in a bowl of water and then freeze it so that if they ever wanted to use it, they'd have to chip it out of a block of ice first before they could get it. Again, you've got to figure out strategies that will help you do you and make the choices that you want. Part 6, student loans. These are a very wise investment, but only if you invest wisely. 64% of students graduating from college have student loans. The interest rate is low and the payoff for a degree in an average income is statistically high. So student loans can be a great way to help you get through college. I graduated college with $20,000 in student loan debt, which was quite a while ago, and I still stayed within the parameters. Now, it was easier for me because there weren't so many different types of loans. Now almost every bank will loan you money for your education, but they are bad loans, okay? And that's the second thing. You need to know that there are different kind of student loans. And I really suggest you focus on getting the right kind, which the best kind is typically the Stafford student loans or government loans. These are the lowest interest rate, and you don't have to start paying them back. They don't accrue interest until after, actually, I'm not sure about that. I don't know when they start accruing interest, but you don't have to start paying them back until 6 months after you graduate or leave school, okay? They also typically have plan so that you can do an income-based plan so you can stretch out your payments. You can make smaller payments over a longer period of time. But remember, the longer period of time, the more you're going to pay for that money. Okay. The other thing is student loans cannot be forgiven unless it's a government program like we're hearing about now. But if you go bankrupt, you still have to pay your student loans. Okay. These do not get written off in bankruptcy. So one of the things you should do is borrow only what you need and have a maximum amount goal. I didn't do this. If I could get $2,500, I only needed $2,000. To me, that was an extra $500 in my bank account. I was going to have a good time. Not a wise choice in the long run, okay? It took me 10 years after graduating college to pay those off, and I would have much rather have that money every month at that point than the few frickin' dinners I bought in college. Okay. The other thing to do is to have a maximum amount goal. Know how much you should stop at. What is the maximum amount you should borrow? So you can also kind of think like, well, I'm only in my first year. I don't want to borrow it all this year because then I won't be able to borrow any later. Okay. So a good goal is to figure out, and we already did this for your home, figure out what your annual income will be once you have your degree. For most college students, this is $50,000 on average, okay? So your goal is to try to stay at less than half of that. Try to stay less than half of your annual income. So a good goal is to stay below $25,000 in student loans. If you're really in trouble and you absolutely need it to finish school, to get through, then you should think of the absolute maximum is 100% of your annual income. Again, I use 50,000 here because that's what most students make in a year with a 4-year degree. I have a friend who has a doctorate in philosophy. She had over $100,000 in student loans, and she had no way to pay that back because, if she was a lawyer or a doctor, that wouldn't have been such a bad thing to have 100,000 plus. But as a philosophy student, what the hell is she going to do? So she borrowed more than double her annual income. She'll never be able to pay that back, or it'll take her 20 or 30 years, which is like a mortgage. So it's crazy. Be careful. So these goals are good to keep in mind. Try to keep it below 25. If absolutely necessary, you can bump that up to 1 year's salary. Borrow and use funds only as needed. Loan checks often feel like free money. Again, bad choice on my side. When I got that money, I loved it. I needed it for tuition and stuff, but I also, was happy to, go to dinner or go out for drinks, etc. Um, but if you use it for a vacation or stuff, you will pay dearly for it later because you're not only paying the price that you paid the first time around, you're paying interest. Hopefully, I haven't beaten that horse too far to death, so to speak. All right, the last thing, a time to reflect. It's your money, it's your future, so it's your choice. Educate yourself, get informed, and make decisions that will benefit you today and tomorrow. Okay? One of the things that I do and have done for the last 10 years is actually it's probably more, probably the last 20 years, even though I was flipping cars, I stopped buying a car the first time I was on a lot. I made an arbitrary rule for myself that I had to sleep on a car, that I wouldn't buy it the first time. The nice part is I learned that a lot of salesmen would give you a better price if you didn't buy it when you were first there. And they always said, well, there's another guy looking at this car. I don't think I ever lost out on a car, and I did get better deals, but it made me feel better. Honestly, it made me feel like an adult for one of the first times because I was choosing to do something that was in my own self-interest longer term and showing that I can control myself. I really want that car. And there were times like that, um, even when I slept on it, that it was hard for me to leave because I really wanted that car. And I didn't always buy the car. Sometimes after sleeping on it overnight, the last time I was looking at a Lexus convertible, never had a really fancy car, and drove it for a while, and it was really hard for me not to do that. And I realized, you know what? My car has a lot of life left. I already own a convertible, so you know, I was able to make a choice that was in my own best interest longer term, and I haven't done that very well with cars until the last decade or so. No strategies work for everyone. You do you. You need to figure out your own goals, whether it's a new shirt or a zero credit dollar balance, whatever, then you need to find a strategy that works for you. Google it, research it. There's tons of information. There's tons of people out there helping people make better financial choices, as short as TikTok videos, as long as TED Talks, etc. You do you, but figure out, don't stay asleep at the wheel. And that's where most of Americans are. They let banks make the choices for them. They let the car dealership make the choices for them and get them a loan. You do you. Figure it out. Make a better choice for you, longer term as well as short term. For bigger decisions, take more time and effort. If you're buying a house or a car, really think about it. Is it time? Do your research homework. Ask yourself the right questions, because banks and salesmen won't. They'll keep you focused on your monthly payment. Hey man, you can be in this Lexus if we just stretch out that payment. You're still only paying $300 a month, etc. Don't forget, not all the questions that you should ask are about money. Like, remember, in the house, it's a good idea to ask how old you'll be when it's paid off. Maybe you want to do that with the car too. But 7 years, how old are you going to be before that damn car is paid off? Will you likely have kids? Do you need to be spending your money elsewhere? Etc. These are things to ask yourself, okay? I hope this has been helpful. And the last thought I want to leave you with is to get started today. TVM means the sooner you start making better money decisions, the bigger the rewards will be. And this is not about once you get out of college. You are spending money right now. All of us are. You have expenses, etc. So think about that. How can you make better choices now, or even just strengthen things? Maybe it's just, strengthening your ability to save some money every month. Maybe you start with 10 or 20 bucks and then you try to raise it by 5. Maybe, for me, it wasn't the saving, it was leaving it in savings. So try to do something that's moving you into a more future-oriented focus on money. I hope this helps. I hope it helps you now, and I hope it helps you, really, really hope it helps you in your future and also on the test.